All right, let's set the scene. Imagine a massive global crisis is blowing up right now. One of the most important waterways in the world is essentially a war zone. Supply lines are getting severed, and economies everywhere are just bracing for impact. But then, right in the middle of all this chaos, some ships are just sailing through. They've got a special pass. So the big question is how? Let's get into it. So picture this, it's early 2026. Tensions have boiled over, and a military conflict erupts after the US and Israel launch joint strikes on Iran. And Iran's response, it's swift and it's dramatic. They basically shut down the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, this is one of the biggest, most important choke points for global trade on the entire planet. And this is where things get really interesting. You've got hundreds of ships, totally stranded, just sitting there, but a handful of them are sailing right on through like nothing's wrong. It's this bizarre exception that makes you stop and ask, okay, who are these ships, and what in the world makes them so special? To really get what's going on here, we have to zoom out a bit and appreciate just how incredibly important this little stretch of water actually is. You know, people call the Strait of Hormuz the world's energy artery, and that's not just some catchy phrase. It's literally the only way out of the Persian Gulf and into the open ocean. So when this artery gets clogged, the entire global economy feels it, instantly. And I'm not exaggerating here, just look at the numbers. A full 20%, that's one-fifth of all the oil the world uses every single day, passes through this one narrow strait. So yeah, when you squeeze that choke point, the pressure builds up across the entire system. Fast. So Iran, retaliating against those military strikes, makes a really calculated move. They don't just shut the whole thing down. Nope, they announce a targeted blockade. They make it very clear the strait is only closed to ships from the US, Israel, and, anyone they consider an ally. And the markets? They freak out. Immediately. Oil prices just shoot past $90 a barrel. It's this insane spike that screams massive supply shock to everyone. And you better believe those ripples are felt in every single major economy almost overnight. But for one country in particular, this isn't just some global crisis they're watching on the news. It's quickly turning into a full-blown national emergency. And that country is India. I mean, think about it. India is Asia's third largest economy. Its appetite for energy is absolutely massive. And because of where it is and how its trade works, any kind of chaos in the Gulf puts it in a really, really tough spot. And to really get a sense of how big this problem is, let's just ignore crude oil for a second and talk about something even more basic, cooking gas, LPG. India imports 60% of what it needs. And get this, a whopping 90% of those imports come right through the Strait of Hormuz. That is a massive, critical vulnerability right there. So the fallout happens almost right away. India suddenly finds itself staring down the barrel of its worst gas shortage in decades. The government has to start cutting supplies to factories and businesses just to make sure people can cook in their own homes. With half its crude oil and basically all of its LPG blocked, the country is right on the edge. So, with its entire economy teetering on the brink, New Delhi does what it has to do. It spins up its diplomatic machine into overdrive. The answer to this crisis isn't going to be found at sea. It's going to be found on the phone. And they move fast. The diplomatic push is relentless, and it goes right to the very top. The first phone call happens on February 28th, the same day the strikes even started. Then, over the next 2 weeks, you've got the foreign ministers talking 4 separate times. And it all leads up to this, a direct call between Prime Minister Modi and the Iranian president himself on March 12th. And it actually works. India pulls off a huge breakthrough. Iran agrees to give safe passage to any ship flying an Indian flag. The very first ones to get through are these 2 LPG carriers, the Shivalik and the Nanda Devi. And they aren't just carrying gas, they're carrying a lifeline for India's entire economy. So you gotta ask, why? Why did Iran make this huge exception for India? Well, this quote from Iran's ambassador to India pretty much says it all. He says it's because Iran and India are friends, they have common interests, common faith. So this wasn't just a business deal. It was framed as something much deeper, built on this long-standing relationship. But let's be real. This special deal isn't just a simple arrangement between 2 old friends. It's way more complicated than that. This is a high-stakes balancing act on a very thin geopolitical tightrope.
What we're seeing here is a perfect example of India's long-standing foreign policy, something they call strategic autonomy. And what does that mean? Well, it's the idea that they can talk to everybody, the US, Russia, Israel, Iran, you name it, without getting locked into any one camp. It's all about flexibility, which lets them do what's best for India in a crisis like this, no matter what.
And this is what makes this whole thing so incredibly significant. You have to remember, under huge pressure from American sanctions, India had completely stopped buying oil from Iran back in 2019. So this new deal, it's not just about turning the taps back on, it's a deliberate move by India to secure its own energy lifeline, even if it means openly going against the wishes of its powerful partners in Washington. This is India bypassing the US, and you can be sure Washington is not happy about it. But a big win like this also comes with new expectations. Right now, India happens to be the chair of the BRICS group, so Iran is now publicly calling on India to use that position to get the whole bloc involved and play a strong and constructive role in calming things down. So that diplomatic tightrope we talked about, it just got a whole lot thinner and a lot more wobbly. And really, this whole episode just puts a giant spotlight on India's central challenge. They managed to secure a vital lifeline by reaching out to an old friend when they absolutely had to. But it leaves us with this huge question. As the world gets more and more divided, with pressure from partners like the US on one side and old friends like Iran on the other, how long can India keep walking this middle path? The answer to that is going to shape not just India's future, but its place on the world stage for a long, long time.